Hi class. This is the first video tutorial or lecture really that I'm going to do for MMP 350. This is a bit new. I'm still kind of testing out various software to figure out what the best setup is going to be. But I'm just going to try to get things set up and kind of pick up where we were before the recess for the for Corona. I hope everybody's doing well and is safe and healthy. I'm hoping that we can continue to work on stuff and keep the same schedule, but obviously your health and safety are a bigger priority right now. So just let me know if you're having any issues. I'll try to be as accommodating as possible. And I know you're probably getting a lot of emails and electronic communication from all of your classes. So I appreciate if you guys can communicate with me as much as possible. I'll try to make things simple. So just let me know if there's anything I can help to do that. I'm gonna try to get started here. Just wanted to say hi on video real quick. I'm gonna get rid of the video window and just get started with the demo. So for this lecture, I'm gonna go over some basics, and then I'm gonna kind of cover where we were in the schedule, which was week 6. So I'm going to actually just start this from scratch. A lot of people missed class last week for obvious reasons. So I'm going to kind of go from scratch over this stuff. And so mainly we're just going to be talking about adding the profile for the user and then interfacing with the Firebase database. So I'm going to start by just going over some basics for setting up your computer. A lot of this stuff we've covered in class before, but I figured since you're probably on a new machine, you may want to kind of go through the setup again. So I'll include links in the video description. If you want to skip this part and skip over to the content, you can do that. But I'm just going to go over setting up GitHub, setting up Sublime Text, and getting those things working. And then I'll go into the content for week 6. And so yeah, I'll just go from there. I will also include links to the code and the class site in the video, and I'll post it on Blackboard. So if you have comments or questions, you can add them on there. One of the disadvantages, obviously, for the video lecture is that you can't raise your hand and ask me to go over stuff again. So if you do have questions, leave them in the Blackboard discussion thread, and I can either respond if it's a simple thing, or I could record another video if there's more stuff that I have to go over, however we need to do it. Anyway, I'm just going to get started, so I will get the basic stuff set up, go over that, and then go into what we covered for week 6. And I'll do some stuff around the assignment at the end. So some of you guys who were in class last week have probably already written all of the code that you need to write, so you could skip ahead to the assignment section. And I'm just going to kind of go over what's you need to do for that. And so that will be due next Wednesday. And if you have any questions, we can set up a meeting before then, or we can email, or however you prefer to communicate. Anyway, I'm going to close this video now and just get started. I'm just going to go by what we did in week 6, but I'm going to kind of start from the beginning. So I'll go over everything in here, and then I'll go over the assignment. So to start, let's just get our development environment set up. So you can see I'm on my Mac home computer. I need to get a copy of my MMP 350 repo onto the desktop here. And so to do that, I'm going to use GitHub. If you don't have the software on your computer, an easy way to get to all of the software is just to go to the home page for the class site. And if you click on the software link in the menu, or just scroll down to where it says software, There's links to everything that we've been using in class. So Sublime is the text editor that I use. You can download that. Brackets, some people are more familiar with, so that's there as well. Chrome, obviously, is the browser that we're using. And then GitHub Desktop is what I'm going to be using right now. So if you don't have that on your home computer, you can go ahead and open that and download it. If you're on Windows or Mac, it should basically be the same. So you can do that there. So I'm going to start by doing that. I'm going to open up GitHub. So since I'm on the Mac, I'm using Spotlight. I can click on the Spotlight here, or I can hit Command Space. And I've got a couple things turned on to try to, make things clear on the screencast. So I have some key command thing down here, so it'll show you if I'm doing, command operations like that. So I'm gonna open up GitHub. And I'm already signed in because I have a couple other repos on here for my other classes. If you're not signed in, you should just sign in. Either way, whether you're signed in or not, eventually what you'll want to do is when you get signed in, you can go to File and go to Clone Repository. And that's how you can get your repository from the GitHub page onto your computer. So I'm going to click Clone Repository. I'll try that again. And so if you're signed in, you'll see all the repos in your GitHub account. And so you can scroll down to find it, or you can type it in right here. So there's my MMP 350. And the last thing I want to do is make sure that I'm putting it somewhere where I know it is. So if you look at the local path, it may say something like Documents or GitHub or something like that. That's okay as long as you know where it is and how to get there. I like to have it on the desktop just so I can see it, and it makes it easier, obviously, when we're working in class. So I'm going to click Choose and go to Desktop and click Open. And then I'm going to click Clone. And after it downloads it, the folder will appear on the desktop. There it is. And so I'm just going to put this up here so we can see it. And so from here, you can pretty much get to everything that you need to. So if you click Show in Finder, it's going to open up your MMP 350 folder right here. If you click View on GitHub, it'll open up your GitHub page, so you can see that. And if you click Open in Sublime Text, so it's detected that I use Sublime Text. If you have brackets installed in your computer, you might see brackets there. Either way, you can click on that to open it in Sublime. You can also go to Sublime and just go to File, Open, and then find your MMP 350 folder and click Open right there. And so however you do it, you just want to make sure, like we do in class, that you have the whole MMP 350 folder here, and then you have your main page right here. I'm going to increase that a bit. So not as much as we do in class, but just so it's a little more visible. And then we have our projects here. So we started this profile project previously. I'm just going to delete that because I'm going to start it from scratch. So I'm just going to go to delete this folder. And so we'll start from scratch there. We're going to look at the Firebase console a bit and add some stuff to the database, and then we're going to create our profile page where we can add new items or fields to the profile. Okay, so now we have our code on our computer, and we need to be able to view it in the browser. In class, so I'm going to do this a couple of ways, and I'll mark them in the YouTube video, so if you want to go back and follow these instructions later, you'll be able to find it easily. But basically, there's two ways to do this. We did it one way in class, and part of the reason that we did that is because we don't actually have administrative access on those lab computers to use the server that Sublime has. So I'm going to go over how to use the terminal and how to use the Sublime server. There's also the brackets live preview, which some of you use, which basically does the same thing. But I'm going to go over both ways to do it. Either way you want to do it is fine. So first, the way we did it in class is we would open a new terminal window. So I already have the terminal open, so I'm just going to click New Window. If you don't have it open, you can go to Spotlight and type in Terminal and just hit Enter, and it'll open up. Yours is going to look a little bit different than mine because I made mine pink, but it should basically be the same thing. The only real important thing is that this symbol is right there. That just means that you're on your user folder. So if you hit PWD, which tells you where you are on the computer, you can see it's in users, and then I'm at my username. And so as long as I'm there, I can move into my folder. So I'll do CD for change directory, desktop, and then MMP 350. And so then I'll see my MMP 350 folder, and then I'll just do, I actually have a different command for this. It kind of depends on which version of Python you had. So in class, we did python-m simple HTTP server. Okay, that doesn't work on my computer. It might work on your computer, so try that first. I have an upgraded version of Python. If you're curious, you can look at what version of Python you have by typing python-version, if you're interested. But you can also just say python-m http.server. That's the new version of it. It does the same thing, so it'll be one of those two commands. Either one, just try one and then the other if the first one doesn't work. So the first command is python-m simple HTTP server. I have this nice little screen drawing tool, and python-m http.server. So that will start my local host. So if I go back to the browser and open a new window, this is going to be at localhost 8000. And so you'll see your project page there. And so that's one way that you can set it up. Perfectly reasonable way to do it. I'm going to close this. Actually, an easier way to do it, and it's only really easier in the sense that you don't have to open the terminal app because you can do it in Sublime, is to install what's called a Sublime package. So I'll go over how to do that now. This will work on either Mac or Windows. You can basically do the same thing. But if it doesn't work, just let me know and we can figure out how to set it up. So I'm going to close this and get rid of my terminal window, and then I'll do that. Okay, so to use the Sublime server, you first have to go to Tools and install the command palette. You can see I already have it installed, which is why you see command palette here. If you haven't used it before, you won't see command palette. So if you don't see command palette here, just click on install command palette. Once you have that installed, you can click on command palette. That brings up the text interface. So you can't click on these, you just have to type. So what we want to do is we want to install a package. So just type in install, and you'll see that it brings up a few different options. We want to do the first one, and so it's highlighted. So as soon as we see that it's highlighted, I can just hit enter, and it's going to think for a second, and then it's going to bring up a new typing interface. And so the package that I want to install is SublimeServer. So if you type in SublimeServer, like I just did, you'll see the first option. You can see in the description it says it's a dead project. It's not being updated anymore, so it may at some point stop working, but for now it still works, so we can use it. So I'm just gonna click on that or hit enter, and it'll take a second to install. And then once I go back to Tools, you'll see there's a new option here, SublimeServer, and you can do Start SublimeServer. So that doesn't actually do anything. It starts the SublimeServer, but nothing changes on the screen. You can also stop and restart the SublimeServer, but it creates that local host. So now we can go back to the browser. And this time I'm going to go to localhost. It's a different address though, so I'll put this in the description in the video. This one is actually localhost 8080. So the first one is 8000, this one is 8080, and that'll bring up the SublimeServer, and you'll see that it's serving our MMP 350 folder because it's in our folders over here. So we need to make sure that it's in the folder left side navigation if it's going to show up over here. So then I click on MMP 350, and now I'm ready to go. So I already actually have this profile link. I'm going to delete that, so we're all starting from the same place. And so now I'm going to just get into the demo. I think we're ready to go. At the end, I'll talk about the assignment and turning in the assignment. So if you've already written this code because you were in class last week, you can actually skip most of this stuff. If you want to review it, obviously you can review it. But this is mostly going to be everything that we would have done during week 6, which a lot of people were not available for. And, you know, obviously there's a lot of sort of stuff going on with the news and everything else. So we're going to start from scratch there. And what we're going to do in this lesson, let's go back over to our class page. So what we're going to do in this lesson under week 6 is we've already used the Firebase database a little bit, but now what you guys are going to do is you're actually going to make new fields to add to the database. And so instead of just using kind of the defaults for the database, you'll create your own fields. So you'll be able to kind of shape your own user profile. So to do that, we're going to create a new HTML page for the user profile. We're going to talk a little bit about the different things that we can add in there, and then we'll update the database. So there's a couple things to go over, but I'll kind of just do this in the demo. If you want to click on these notes, you can go over some of the basics, but I'll be talking about this. So I'm just going to kind of do the demo from scratch, and then if you have other questions, you can take a look at the notes here or just email me. So yeah, let's get started. So we're going to make a user profile, and so we need a new folder for that. So as we normally do, here's my MMP 350 folder. The last thing that we did was the color section, right? Yes. So I'm going to start where I left off with the color section, but now I'm going to add in the user profile. So to do that, I'm going to duplicate this color folder. So I can hit Command D to duplicate it. I could also hit Command C, Command V, and make a copy, although it's not letting me do that. So maybe I could just do copy, paste. Yeah. So I can make a copy or I can duplicate it. Either way is fine. And I'm just going to rename this folder profile. And again, we're going to be working on the files that we already have and adding new stuff into them. So I'll also kind of make timeline points in YouTube to show when we're working on each different part if you want to go back and redo something later. So in order to access this, we need to add a link on our main page. So I'm going to go back to Sublime. So here's index.html. That's our landing page. Okay, that's what we see right here with the links to each project. So I'm just going to add a new link here. So I'll add a list item and an anchor tag, href. This one is profile because we're adding a user profile section. And then I'm just going to write profile to click on, and then close the anchor tag and close the list item. Okay, so I'm going to save that and then refresh over here. And there's my profile. So I'll just click on there. And so this is what our site looked like after we added color. Actually doesn't really look that bad. Probably could look better, but that's okay. And so we're going to get started. I'm going to open up this console window just so I can have that ready to go. If I have errors or if I want to look at stuff over in Elements, I'll make this a bit bigger just so it's more visible. But here's my site. One of the advantages of using the local host is when I sign in, I'll stay signed in. So I'm going to sign in as my Banana account, or at least I think that's what it is. I'm going to click Login. And there we go. Okay, I renamed my Banana account Apple, but that's my account there. And so we're going to do a couple things on the index page, basically to make it possible to edit the user profile. So there's a couple of things that we have to check. We got to make sure that you actually are the user that you say before you are allowed to kind of edit your profile. So we're going to add some things on index.html first, and then we're going to create the profile page. So I'll add links for the different parts of the video for this as well. Okay, so since we're logged in, we want to give the user like a button to click on to go to their profile page. It's kind of like on GitHub. Like if I go to github.com, really any service is going to be like this. When I'm here, I can sign in or I can sign up, but if I go to somebody's repo, like let's say I went to my own repo, but I'm not signed in, I can look at other people's code and stuff like that. But if I click sign in or sign up, I can't like edit this, profile. I guess I can click on the image, but I'm not signed in, so there's no reason why I should be allowed to edit this stuff. But if I sign in, now all of a sudden this top menu bar is very different. I have like a link to my user profile and other stuff that I can do once I'm logged in. So actually I'm still looking at the wrong one. I'm signed into my BMCC account. Okay, so now here that I'm on the right profile, I can click the edit profile button. And for them, it just comes up right here. We're gonna make a separate page for it just to keep things simple. But I can add a bio, I can add a company, location, email, website. So these are all things that might be useful for GitHub, because you could say, I'm a programmer, my specialty is JavaScript or whatever. You could say, oh, I work for this company, or something like that. You could say location. So it's kind of useful for just adding some basic information about yourself. So this will be an opportunity for you guys to start to make your own version of this application, where you can say what the kind of information you want to see from your users would be. So actually I'm going to leave this here because we might want to come back later. So I'm just going to minimize that. So now that we're signed in, we want to show the user like a edit profile button. And we also want to give them the ability to log out. So right in here, we have the login button, but there's no reason to have a logout button if you're not logged in. So we'll add both of those into this, what did I call this? This is the user info section. So let's just add that HTML, and then we can update the CSS and the JavaScript as well. So I'm going to close the landing page here. I'm going to open up profile folder and just open up index.html. And here's my user info section. Right now, all that goes there is the username. Okay, not very exciting. It doesn't even getting the styling right here. So let's actually do that first. I'm going to go to CSS and go to color CSS and just say, let's give it, where's our titles? Oh, here's our title. So I'm just going to put the paragraph in there as well, so we can get that styling, and then let's put that in typography too. Okay, so our post and our anchor. Okay, so let's make this like this one. So I'm going to put paragraph here just to select all of our paragraphs. Okay, so that's a little bit better. And then let's see, we can maybe add some other stuff later. So at least it has the same color. So we have the username. So now we need to add two buttons, one for editing the profile and one for logging out. And we'll add the JavaScript to make those work in a bit. So we'll start with a button. We'll say ID is edit profile button. And I'll just say edit profile here. And then I'll have another button. ID is log out button. And this will just be log out. Okay, so we have those two links in there now, but our page is starting to look a bit crowded. Since we're logged in, we really don't need this login information here right now. So I'm going to show you guys a pretty neat trick that we can use to make that stuff disappear after we've logged in. So that's the next part we're going to do. We're actually done with the HTML. That's everything we need. We're just going to add some JavaScript, maybe a bit of CSS, and then we'll be done with this part. Okay, one thing I do actually want to change, I realized, is that the edit profile is going to be a link, because we're going to change the hypertext reference here rather than click on a button. So I'm just going to change that real quick. I'm going to make this an anchor tag, and then I'm just going to call this link instead of button. And that'll change the styling a little bit. That's okay. We'll style this a bit more in a bit, but we just want that to be a link because of the way that we're going to set this up. So now the edit profile will be a button, or the logout will be a button, edit profile will just be a link. Okay, so let's go into auth.js, and we're just going to add a couple things in there to make these this link and this button actually work. So I'm going to close this. I'm going to bring up auth.js. And so we're going to add some stuff in here. we need to start by, of course, getting a reference to the logout button. And we also need to get a reference to the profile link. So I'm going to say constant log out button is js.getL log, what did I call it? Log out dash button. And then our profile link, so we'll just say profile link equals js.getL, and then edit dash profile dash link. Okay, so you would usually with a link you write the link beforehand, the hypertext reference. But in our case, we actually don't know who's logged in until they log in. So we have to wait until we get down to this user logged in section, or else we have no idea who they are and we don't know where to link to. So that's why we need to do that in the JavaScript, because it's something that happens after the page loads. So let's make the logout button work first. So it's pretty simple. We see this login button here. I'll put it right below there. So I'll just say logout button dot on click. We can just pretty much use the exact same syntax, and then function. And this one for log in, you need the email and the password because you have to authenticate the user. But to log out, we really don't care who they are if they're logging out. Anybody can just log out. So all we have to do here is just say fb.logout, and hopefully that'll work. So remember, FB is from our helpers file. I probably am going to have to update the helpers file again after this lecture, so I'll include a link to that in YouTube as well. But here's our helpers file, bunch of stuff that does things that we don't want to write from scratch. Whoops. And so here's the helper for login, and here's the helper for logout. So that's all we really need to do for that. Let's test it and then keep going. So I am logged in. I'm going to refresh the page. And I'm going to stay logged in. I don't remember when I went over this in class, but if you're using a local server, you don't have to log in every time, because Firebase actually is allowed, when you're running a server, to store what's called a cookie or a local storage that tells them who you are. So you can see in here that it's got this Firebase thing here, and there might be one in here. Yeah, there's one in here as well. So this actually basically lets the browser keep track of who you are and sign you back in again. So that's a nice feature that we don't have to keep logging in. Anyway, I'm going to log out. Nothing happened. We're going to change that in a minute. But when I refresh, now I'm not going to be logged in. So there's no more welcome Apple. So I guess one thing we might want to do when we log out, well, actually, we're going to do something that takes care of that in a second. So let's log in again, b@b.com, 123, 123. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is add the link to edit profile. So that we're going to do down here in the user logged in function. So when we get the user logged in function, we get to the user ID, which is what we need to know to create the link. So we can go to the profile page, but then we have to tell them what user we're looking at. So for here, after we set the user name, I'm just going to add the link to the user profile. And so we already have a reference to the profile link here. So we just need to set the href. So we can do that pretty easily. We just say profile link.href, and then we're going to set it to a string that includes profile.html. So we'll say profile.html. And then we're just going to add the user ID to the end of this. And I'll talk about this a bit more in a second, but essentially what we're doing here is we're adding a parameter to our search. So the parameter is, actually I can just put this at the end of the string here. So I'm going to say profile.html question mark UID equals, and then we put the UID right here. And so what that question mark does is saying basically the location is over, but there's some extra parameters that we need to add in because this location could be many different users' profiles. And you'll see that question mark in a lot of URLs. Like even if I just Google something, so let's say I just Google cat image, you can see in the Google link at the top here, maybe I can zoom in. Yeah, I can. Right here. So it says google.com/search Q equals cat. Okay, so that's essentially what we're doing with our own program is when we do a Google search, we always go to this search page, but Google needs to know what we're searching for. And so it uses what's called a parameter. And basically parameters start with a question mark, and then after that we have the name of the parameter. So this is probably Q for query, and then the value that we're searching for. So cat plus image. So that's what we're going to do to implement looking up different users' profiles. So let's close that. So that's all we need to do for this. The next thing that I'm going to do is a little trick. I'm going to add a new class to the body of my page. So I'm going to add the auth class, short for authenticated, to the body. So all I have to do is say document.body.classlist.add and then auth. And what this is going to do is just add a little class to the body tag of our site. And we're going to use that to do some cool CSS stuff where we're going to hide the things that we don't want to see anymore. So now you can see body class right here is auth. And so far that doesn't do anything, but we'll add it to our CSS. So I'm going to refresh the page. So we are logged in, so we do see that auth. So that's basically a way of just telling our page that we are authenticated, that the user is logged in, and then we can use that to change the layout a bit. So in our CSS, we can put this maybe in main.css. So after I do some basic stuff here, I'm just going to put in authenticated. So this is what happens when the user is authenticated and not authenticated. So the first thing we want to do is say if the user is authenticated, we can just get rid of this login section. So that whole section is just called login. And so what I can say is body.auth. So I'm basically saying a body with the auth class, and then space. So this is going to target anything inside that body. ID login. So this is a login if it's inside the auth class. Then we'll just say display is none. So that's a really good trick to just say, all right, we're logged in, so we don't need to see any of this stuff. This is kind of bothering me that these things are sticking together right here. So I'm just going to add a style to take care of that. I'm just going to say user-info, margin bottom is 1em. So this is just like a temporary fix so that I don't have to see this happening. I could probably make this user info paragraph like not take up the whole page. But actually we're going to do some stuff. We're going to learn how to do that in a lot more depth in a couple weeks. So I'm going to hold off on that for now. So that looks great. Now we don't have to see the login section. And if I log out, oh, actually we haven't written that code yet. So let's do that now. So if I'm logged in, then we shouldn't see the login section. If we log out, then we want to hide the user info section. So this is just regular body user-info is display none. Okay, so once we load the page, if we're not logged in, we don't see any user info. And if I then log in, so I'll say b@b.com, password, login. Okay, so now our login goes away, but we have to make sure the user info comes back. So right now it's still display none. You can see down here. So that's for authenticated. So this one is body.auth user-info. So if we are logged in, then we want to see it. So we'll just say display is block. Okay, so now we see the user info. We're logged in and we log out. Okay, so the last thing we have to do is when we click the logout button, we want something to happen. Okay, so the way we do that is we have another function that our helpers gives us, which is no user. So if there's no user, we basically just want to remove auth from the body. So we can just copy this code in there and just change add to remove. So if the user does log out, this function will be called and will take off the auth section, the auth class. So then things will go back to normal. So again, if I log in, let's make sure all this works. Okay, now we see the user info section and the body class is off. Okay, and if I log out, the login section comes back and the user info section goes back to display none. So that's a really simple way, using a little bit of JavaScript, just this much, and a bit of CSS, just this much, to kind of change our layout depending on what is happening with our user. Now that we've got that all sorted out, we can actually start working on the profile page. So when I log in, I'll get this edit profile link. And if I click on there, we're going to go to profile.html, which doesn't exist, but we're going to create it. And we're going to get the user ID at the end. So again, I have profile.html. Here's my parameter, user ID, and then here's this big long user ID. And I can look that up in the database. Obviously, our user can't do that. They don't have access to the database. But since I'm the developer, I can just go over to console.firebase.google.com. And I'll choose the MMP 350 Gmail. Okay, so I'm having a bit of an issue with my Google account, but that's okay. I can sign in an incognito window, so I'll just debug that later. Anyway, so here's my console.firebase.google.com. I am signed in. I'm going to go to MMP 350-S20, which is our database. And when I go to database and open up users, I should be able to find, we have a lot of users, but I think this one is the user. Yes, so we can see display name is Apple. The bio I already added in a previous version of this tutorial, but I'll just take it out for now. So I'll just click X on there. So yeah, you can delete data manually, but obviously our users don't have access to the database. What we're building is an interface where they can add their data. So this is a user we're working on, but this page will work for any user in our database. So first what we need to do is create profile.html. Then we just need to figure out who the user is and add their information into the page. So to create profile.html, it's going to be very similar to index.html. So rather than write all that code again, I'm just going to go to my Finder. I'm going to take index.html and I'm going to hit Command D and make a copy and call this profile.html. So I want to make sure I'm in the profile folder. I'm just going to make profile.html. And then when I open that, I can just delete the stuff that I don't need anymore and add some new stuff. So I'll go back to Sublime and go to profile.html. And so most of the stuff I can leave the same. I'm scrolling down. I can still leave this user info. The login section, you know, I don't really need that, but you know, I might want to log in, so I can leave that in here. The thing I definitely don't need is this publish post section, so I can get rid of that. That's where you actually see all the published posts. And then the post section, so we can get rid of that as well. So in here, we'll just add a new kind of main area. So this is just going to be div ID equals profile, I guess we can just call it. So that's going to be the main profile section. And then we need a few things in here to display the profile, but also to update the profile. So the way that this page is going to work is if you're looking at somebody else's profile, you'll just be able to see their information. But if you're looking at your own profile, you can edit the information. And in order to make that work, we have to use interactive HTML components like the input and the text area. So that's what we're going to add here first. So for the username, and we can style these later to make them look, you know, more like how we want them. But for the username, I'm going to say profile display name. I just want to make sure that I don't use the same IDs as any of these, so that would mess up my code. And for this, I don't actually need to put any data because it's an input, so we'll add the data using the database later. But I am going to put a placeholder. If for some reason this data isn't there, they'll know what to add here. So I'm just going to put username. So now we have the page. So we're logged in and we can see the username here. So we are going to want to add some styles to that so it looks more like a regular profile. But for now, we can just see that that's working. So that'll be where you can either view or edit your user profile name. So then for the bio, I'm going to add a much larger area so you can write more. So that's the text area. And so the ID for this will be profile-bio. And this one, again, we don't want to put any content in the HTML element because people are going to be adding their own content. So I'm just going to put a placeholder that says, right, or let's say just add your bio. So if they haven't added a bio yet, they'll be able to do it here. And we can add some CSS to style this a little bit better in a moment. So the last thing that I need in my HTML in this section is a button that the user can click to update their profile, again, if they're logged in. If they're not logged in, we won't show the button. So the button ID is update-profile. And I'm just going to put update profile as the text, so it'll be very clear. And so again, we'll hide that if we're not logged in or if we're not the same user, and then we'll show it if we are the same user who's logged in. Let's do the JavaScript and then we'll be done. So I still need the helpers and I still need auth because I still need to know if I'm logged in. I no longer need publish.js. We're not going to be posting. We're not going to be displaying posts, so I can get rid of that file. And then finally, the script to load the post, I don't need that either. We're just going to add one new script, which is js/profile.js. So that's where we're going to load and then edit the data in the profile. So if I want to style just like, one page, I want to add a new CSS file for that just so I know where to look. So I'm going to go to style.css. And so I have publish and post. I'm just going to import css/profile.css. So you want to add that CSS file first. And so then I'll make a new file, Command N, and save as. Go to my CSS folder and go to profile.css. And since I'm on the video recording, I have a little more space on the screen to work with. So I'm just going to go to the 2-column layout on Sublime. You can do Command Option 2, or you can go to View, Layout, and then 2 columns. So this way I can kind of see things next to each other. Makes it a little easier to see what's going on. So the thing that I want to change the style of is the profile display name first. So I'm going to say ID profile-display name. And I want this to be a bit bigger, and I want to unset some of those values. So one way I can do that is, let's say the background color is, I forget what the name for this is. It's not inherit. Oh yeah, actually that works. So if we don't like the style that was added in this like previous thing in here, if we change it to inherit, what that's going to do is it's going to inherit from this div. And so since this div is transparent, now the input will be transparent as well. So that's a good way to overwrite a style without having to write a new style. I forget what the other, if I do like auto, that doesn't work. There's some other ones like that, but I can't remember what they are. Anyway, you could also just set it to transparent. That'll do the same thing. But I like to say inherit. That way we don't have to like write a whole new color. I'm going to make it a bit bigger. Oh, actually, let's get rid of this border because it's not a button or an input. So let's say border is also inherit. Okay. And maybe we can put a border on the bottom so it's underlined. So I'll say border bottom. Maybe I'll make it kind of big, so 2 pixels, solid. And then I'll use the, I'll try the main color first. So I'm going to use that custom property, var-main-color. See if that looks good. I can try one of the other colors if not. Oh, and you know what I'm seeing? Let's put a margin under this too, because we're going to have to add a bunch of layout stuff later when we get into that this semester. But just so we can see it. You can still kind of see these like little curves here because we set a border radius previously for the inputs. So let's get rid of that. I'm going to say I'll do this up here as well. Border radius is inherit. Again, you could just set it to 0. I'm using inherit just to kind of be specific about what I'm doing, but it really doesn't matter how you do that. And then last thing I want to do is I want to make that a bit bigger. So I'm going to change the font size. So try 2EM. That might be too big. It's not crazy. Maybe I'll do 1.75. Okay, that looks pretty decent. That looks okay. I actually don't really like the 2 pixels. I'm going to go back to 1 pixel. Okay, so we have the username, we have our bio. That styling actually doesn't look so bad. This looks fine. So for now, this is really all I need here. I'm happy with this. So I'll just leave that there. And so I'm going to close. Well, I'll just leave it in there in case I need it later. So now we're ready to actually load the data from the database. So what we want to do is we need to get our user. Let me see if I can find. Yeah, we need to get our user ID, and then we're going to go to the database and ask for that data. And for at first we'll just get this display name back, but then we're going to be able to add more data as well. So let's go create a new file, and I'm going to leave the split view open so we can look at the JavaScript versus the HTML. So the first thing that I need to do, I'm going to save this. So I'll save it in profile.js. It's called profile.js. Okay, so we need to get the user profile ID. So I'm going to say get the user profile ID. So keep in mind, this may not be the person who's logged in. You may be looking at somebody else's profile. So we just want to know whose data to get. We're going to worry about whether or not they can edit it second. So the way that I get the profile ID is just using a bit of JavaScript. So I can get the href, the location, by using the location variable, which is a built-in JavaScript. And then I can get the search term by using location.search. So then I just have to do a little bit of text manipulation to get the ID out of here. You can see there's like a little equal sign here. So I'm just going to split there and then take the second part. So if I say location.search.split, that's a way that I can split a long string, or even a short string, any string. But I give it a character, and I know that it's only going to have an equal sign here. It's not going to be somewhere in this long string. So if I do a split, then it gives me a list with the first part is everything before the equal sign. The second part is everything after the equal sign. And so the first part is index 0, the second part is index 1. So if I want to know the user ID, I just take that, location.search.split, and then I take the second, or the 1 index. So I'll just copy that into my code. So I'm just going to say the profile user ID, UID, is location.search.split on equals, and then give me the second part. So now I can get the user profile. I'm going to use a helper function for this. I'm going to say fb.getUserProfile, and I'm just going to give it the profile UID. So that's going to get our data for us. It's also going to call a function called displayProfile, and we get two things from that. This is again coming over from helpers. We get the user name, and we get the user info. So the user name is part of the user info, but it's nice to have it first so we can just add it. Our users have to have a username when they sign up, so we know that that's going to be there. So let's just take a look at that stuff before we use it. So we have the user name and then the user info. So we get Apple as the username, and then we get the user info, which is actually just display name Apple. But this is coming directly from the database. So for example, if I go to the database and I just like add a field manually, again, this is not how we're going to do it because our users can't do this, but just as an example. So I can say example, and then I can say the value is 1 million and click add. So now when I reload here, now we get that data. So we get display name is Apple, example is 1 million. So any data that's in our database for that specific user we'll get when we load the user. So I'm going to delete that. So we need to get the data and then put it into the actual user interface. So let's do that. So first I need to get a reference to the profile section. Oh, that's index.html. So here we want to put that username into the value of this input so we can see it. So we're going to get a reference to that first. So remember, I just have to say display name equals, or let's say profile name, because I think I used display name somewhere else. Profile name equals js.getL, and then we just have to make sure this matches. So I'll just take the ID here and paste it in over here. And while we're here, we might as well get the bio and the button as well. So we'll say constant profile bio is js.getL, and then we'll take that bio ID and put it in there. And then the update button, I'll just say profile button, is js.getL, and then I'll put in this ID here. So now we have a reference to everything. And so we can start by adding the display name. So we know our user is always going to have a display name. So we can say profile name equals, or actually we have to set the value. So we have to say dot value is user name. So the value is what you actually see in the profile input. So when we do this again, it should say apple. And because it's an input, I can edit this. I can say banana. But that's not going to do anything because we haven't actually set it up to change the database yet. So I can edit it, but we need to add some stuff to the database so that it actually saves those changes. So let's do that, and then we will add the bio. So if I want to update this profile name, I need to know that the user clicked the update button. So I'm just going to add an event listener there. I'm going to say update button.onClick equals function. This is a helper, and the helper takes 3 arguments. So we need to know the user ID, the thing that we want to call it, like the field name. Okay, so right now in our database, the field name for display name is just display name. So every single user has a display name. That's the field name. The value is different for each user. So to change the display name, I say Firebase.update profile. Then I give it the user ID, so profile UID. And then I say which field I'm changing, so this is display name. And then the value that's in this profile name input. So profile name dot value. I called this profile button, and then I called it update button. So I just have to stay consistent. So if I want to change my username to banana, and I hit update profile, see how it already changed up here? That's because it changed in the database right there. And let's actually, if I make this window a bit smaller and put it over here, the cool thing about Firebase is that it's real time. So you can see if I do something, it changes instantly. So let's make this a bit smaller. Okay, so if I change it back to Apple and hit update profile, you can see yellow means it's changed. Green means it's new. So then I'll go back to banana. So I'm not going to do this forever, but you can see it's updating here. So that's pretty cool. So now what we can do is add in a bio section. The bio section doesn't exist to begin with, so we can add it in. So let's add that to our code first. So I have a reference to the profile bio here. So if I say fb.update profile, so it's the exact same thing. I'm using the same user's ID, This time, instead of display name, I'm updating bio. Okay, so the field that I'm changing for this user is the bio. So then I say profile bio.value. So I'll save that, and that'll update it. It's not going to display yet, but it will update it in the database. So let's take a look at that. So I'm going to refresh, and I'm going to say, hello, I'm a banana. And then update profile. There we go. There's our new data. So you can actually make that do anything you want. I can say fb.update profile. I'll just grab the UID from up here. And I'll say blah, blah, blah. And the value is 100. So there we go, blah, 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 100. So anything I want to add into the database, I can do using this fb.updateProfile function. You don't want to add blah, blah, blah. You probably want to add something more meaningful, but in the assignment, I'm going to let you guys decide what you want to add. So the last thing that we have to do, we're almost done, is that when I refresh this page, that bio's gone. So we updated the database, but now we're not displaying it. So that's the last thing that we have to add. What I want to do here, it's going to be a little bit different than profile name.value because the bio doesn't exist until the user adds it. So we'll get an error if we try to load the bio before it exists. So we have to check to make sure the bio exists first. So if it does exist, it'll be part of this user info. So I'm going to say add other fields. So if user info.bio, so that's just saying if this field, if this data exists, then we want to add it. So if it exists, we'll say profile bio dot value equals user info dot bio. So bio is the field name that goes in the database. So that's when we ask for it, and that's how we reference it from the user info, which comes from the database. And then we assign it back to the profile bio, which is a reference, remember, to our index page over here. And so we just assign that, we just put that data back in the value. So now when we reload the page, we see, hello, I'm a banana. And I'll say, I'm from New York City. And update profile. We see it change in the database, see it change over here, and there we go. So one more thing, if I am looking at somebody else's profile, we don't want to see this update button. So let's say I took this link and I went to a page where I wasn't logged in. So I'm going to open up another incognito window, and I'm going to open it here. Okay, so I can see the data, that's great, but I don't want to be able to update. And it actually gives me an error, like permission is denied. So that's good, but to avoid even getting that error at all, we just want to get rid of this update profile. So we can do that real quick. Okay, so we can do that real quick using another helpers function. So the function profile logged in, and that'll give us the UID. So that'll tell us who's logged in if somebody is logged in. And what we can do is we can compare the profile ID to the UID. So we can console.log UID profile UID. So we can see those two values are the same. And if I were to go to a different user page, like if I copy this value, it's kind of hard to copy. Now we can see, I can still see the user, but this information is different. So let's hide the profile button unless they're logged in. So I'll go back to profile.css, and I'll look at update profile. Okay, so I'll do ID update profile, display is none. So that's the default. So we're going to assume that the user is not looking at their own profile. Okay, so now I don't see that user, the update button, I just see the user. And we can style this differently as well. But if I'm logged in and this match, then I can just ask if they match. So I can say if UID double equals profile UID, then we'll just say our profile button dot style dot display is block. So now we see the update button. That's everything that we need to do. I'm going to upload that code and post it, and then I'll go over the assignment. So I'll go over a couple things with GitHub. This will be some review, but it might be good for us to talk about it again. So I've added in all these new profile things. I'm just going to create a commit message. I'm going to say adds profile page and commit to master and push to origin. So when you guys are working on your assignment, just remember that you can go to view in GitHub, and that'll take you to your GitHub page. I'm actually signed in under a different GitHub account, so I can't see that settings link right there. But if I go back to here, where I am signed in, and go to MMP 350, then you'll see the settings link. You can go and get that link here, and then go to profile. So that's what you would turn in for your homework. So I'm going to close this. So I'm going to talk about the assignment for a second, and then I'll pause. And for people who want to try figuring it out on their own, you can pause the video and just work on it on your own. For those of you who think you need a little more help as far as how to start, I'll add a few more instructions. So I'll pause at that time. So the assignment is to add 2 new fields to the user profile. And these fields can be whatever you want them to be. So you can decide. So a couple examples are you can add a link, you could add an email, a social media handle, a location. You can look at other web services and see the kinds of things that they let their users add. So you could add a link to their favorite video, or whatever you want them to do. And you can start to kind of tailor your version of our app to however you want to create it. To do that, what you basically want to do is add an input or a text area into profile.html. There's a couple other types of inputs that you might want to use, like radio or checkboxes, but unless you specifically want to do that, I'll leave that out for now. Then what you want to do is save that information into the database and then display that on the profile page. So all the code is there. You just have to look at it and figure out what do I need to add and how do I need to change it. And essentially what you should see when it works is if you're logged in and you're editing your user, you should see new fields pop up. So if you decided to add a link, you would see link here and then the link that the user added. And then they'd be able to change it as well. So that's the basic idea for the assignment. So you'd have to add a little bit of HTML, a little bit of JavaScript, but it should be pretty straightforward. So I'm going to pause here. If you think you want to try that on your own, pause the video and just start working on it. If you want a little bit more, sort of scaffolding to get started, I'll do that now. Okay, so for those of you guys who want a little more scaffolding, I'm just going to kind of like draw on the screen to try to make some connections. So over here is profile.html, and over here is JavaScript. So basically what you have to do is this input here, right here, is the same input that we see right here. Okay, so if you want a short response for the user to add, like the name, you can use an input. So you just add a new input in HTML, change the ID to match whatever it is you want. So if it's an email, just say profile email. If it's a link, say profile link. If it's a location, etc. If it's a longer response, like this bio area, then just use a text area. So just copy and paste this text area section, change the ID, probably change the placeholder so it's more specific. You don't have to make a new button because the button updates everything. So no matter how many things we add in here, we only need one button. So you just have to make either 2 new inputs, 2 new text areas, 1 new input, 1 new text area. Just either 2 total HTML things. Okay, so that's the first part. part one. Okay, part two is getting references to those elements. Okay, so you just make a new constant with the name of the thing and javascript.getL, and then this ID just has to match the ID for the thing that you just created. So you just need two of those. So that's two constants, two variable names. They have to be different than what's already here. And then the two IDs that you added. Okay, so then you need to update the database. So that's step 3. It actually kind of happens down here. And that's pretty simple. You just need to take this line of code and change this to the field that you've added. So if it's an email, change this to email. If it's a link, change this to link. And then change this element to whatever the new HTML element you added up here. So you would do that twice. Okay, so that's step 3. And then finally, step 4 is up here. This if statement is what you would want to use, because again, as you're adding new data, the user doesn't have to have it, so you have to make sure that they've added it first before you display it. So you'd repeat this section. If this user info dot whatever you added down here exists, then your profile element for whatever it is, if it's email or location or whatever, dot value, gets user info, and then this matches this. So whatever it is that ends up in that field. Okay, so I'm going to do a quick example where I'm going to add a banana field. So again, you're going to want to add something real, like an email, link, or something like that. But I'm just going to add a pretend field. Again, if you think you've got it and you want to try it on your own, go for it. If you are still looking for a little help, just follow along. So I would add an input. I would give it a new ID. I'm going to call this profile-banana, and I'll give it a placeholder. It's just going to say banana. Okay, so that's the HTML. You would just do that twice for two different things. So here's the banana section. Okay, so then I would have to get a reference to it. So I would make constant profile banana equals js.getL, and then I'd take the ID that I made and throw that in here. Okay. So now I have a reference to this section. Like if I type in profile banana here, did I spell it wrong? Oh, I need to reload. Profile banana. Yeah, there it is. So now I actually have a reference in JavaScript to this section. So then I need to do the update. So Firebase.update profile. Same thing, profile UID. Whoops. And this new field is banana. Again, you can call it whatever you want as long as you reference it the same way. And then this gets profile banana.value. So that's whatever the user typed in. So then finally, the last part is if user info.banana profile banana equals user info.banana. Okay, so now if all of this worked, if I type something in here like apple and then click update profile, so now we see that field is added. The field is banana, the data I added is apple, and we can see it up here in our data. Getting an error here on profile 22. Oh, I can't set this whole thing. I have to say, sorry, I screwed that up. So not profile banana, profile banana.value. I'm not changing the element, I'm changing the value that you see inside the element. So that's what we see there. Okay, so that's my kind of extended overview. So you'd basically just have to go through those steps twice. I'm going to delete this stuff because I don't actually want it in there. But so just start by choosing the two fields that you want to add, and then just go through that process for those two fields. Okay, so that is it for this video. If you have any questions, just put them in the Blackboard discussion that I'll add, or you can just email me directly. If you're having any technical issues, again, we can set up a meeting and do a screen share so I can take a look at what you're doing. So that's it for this one, and I'll post links to everything in the YouTube description.